High Admiral Kexnar stood before the Varaxian High Council, his crystalline exoskeleton gleaming under the pale light of the chamber's bioluminescent walls. His recent reconnaissance of the human colonies had yielded what he believed to be the perfect strategy for subjugating this troublesome species. These humans, he clicked his mandibles in contemplation, are physically weak compared to our warriors, yet they've managed to resist our expansion into their territories through sheer determination and unpredictable tactics. However, I've discovered their greatest weakness. The council members leaned forward, their compound eyes reflecting eager anticipation. Humans had proven to be surprisingly resilient opponents, halting the Varaxian Empire's thousand-year expansion across the galaxy. They have an inexplicable attachment to their young, Kexnar continued. Unlike our species, where the strong survive and the weak perish naturally, humans expend extraordinary resources protecting and nurturing even their weakest offspring. This irrational behavior is the key to their downfall. First speaker Zareth raised a clawed appendage. Explain your strategy, Admiral. A precise strike on their outer colonies. We take their young as leverage. Their military will have no choice but to stand down when faced with the possibility of harm coming to their offspring. It's basic logic. They'll sacrifice their strategic position to protect these children. The council chamber filled with approving clicks and whistles. Only Elder Valkyr, ancient even by Varaxian standards, remained silent, her scarred carapace shifting uncomfortably. I must voice concern, she finally spoke, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. In all my years studying other species, I've noticed a pattern. Species that form strong bonds with their offspring tend to react unpredictably when those bonds are threatened. Kexnar dismissed her warning with a wave of his upper limb. With respect, Elder, your caution is noted but unnecessary. Our forces are superior in every measurable way. What could they possibly do? The operation launched 3 solar cycles later. Varaxian strike forces hit 3 human colony worlds simultaneously: New Eden, Threshold, and Aurora Prime. Their ships descended through the atmosphere like metallic wasps, precision-guided weapons disabling defensive positions with surgical accuracy. On New Eden, squad leader Tekris led the ground assault on Colony Hub 7. His warriors moved with practiced efficiency through the streets, their crystalline armor deflecting the humans' primitive projectile weapons. Their orders were precise: secure the education centers and residential zones, capture the young, minimal casualties. This is too easy, Tekris commented as his squad secured another group of human children. They're barely resisting. His second-in-command, Vexmore, watched as the human adults were restrained, their expressions a mixture of terror and something else, something he couldn't quite identify. Sir, something feels wrong. These humans, they're not fighting as hard as our intelligence suggested they could. Because we've played this perfectly, Tekris replied. They know they can't risk their offspring. See, they're breaking already. But he was wrong. So terribly wrong. The first sign came 12 hours after the raids. A single transmission, broadcast on all frequencies, in every human language and Varaxian dialect. You took our children. No force in this galaxy will protect you from what comes next. High Admiral Kexnar dismissed it as empty bravado. But Elder Valkyr, watching from her chamber as reports came in, recognized it for what it was: not a threat, but a promise. 24 hours later, the first human response arrived. Not their regular military forces, something else. Ships of designs never before encountered dropped out of hyperspace, their hulls painted matte black, bearing no insignia except for a single symbol, a stylized human child's handprint in blood red. The Varaxian defense fleet above New Eden moved to intercept. They expected a conventional battle. What they got was extinction. The human ships didn't bother with standard engagement protocols. They simply accelerated to maximum velocity, their drives burning so hot that they were destroying themselves. The Varaxian commanders realized too late what was happening. These were one-way trips. The first wave of suicide rams broke through New Eden's orbital defenses in under 6 minutes. The second wave wasn't ships at all, just swarms of autonomous drones carrying nuclear payloads. By the time the third wave arrived, there was nothing left of the Varaxian fleet to oppose them. In his command center, Kexnar watched in horror as similar reports came in from Threshold and Aurora Prime. The humans weren't fighting to win. They were fighting to annihilate. Elder Valkyr's voice came through on a private channel. You didn't just take their children, Admiral. You took their future. And now, they have nothing left to lose. As the first human drop pods began punching through New Eden's atmosphere, Kexnar finally understood. They hadn't discovered humanity's weakness at all. They had awakened something that should have remained sleeping. The real war was about to begin. Fleet Admiral Helena Reyes stood in the war room of the UES Nemesis, her weathered face illuminated by the holographic display of Varaxian space. Around her, the joint chiefs of every human colony world had gathered, either in person or via secure quantum link. The room crackled with barely contained fury. 3,417. She spoke, her voice carrying the weight of each number. That's how many children the Varaxians took, some as young as 3 years old. She paused, letting the number sink in. They thought this would make us surrender. Instead, it has unified humanity like nothing in our history. The holographic display shifted, showing the massive mobilization taking place across human space. Civilian ships were being converted to warships. Retired veterans were returning to service. Weapons research facilities were operating at maximum capacity. Safety protocols be damned. The Varaxians believe they understand human warfare, Rice continued. They've studied our military doctrine, our tactics, our conventional responses. What they don't understand is that those rules existed to protect us from ourselves. They just made us throw away the rulebook. Director Chen of Intelligence stepped forward, her uniform bearing the same blood-red handprint that had become humanity's new battle standard. We've identified the primary holding facility. The Varaxians are keeping most of the children on their fortress world, Varketh Prime. They believe its defenses make it impregnable. The room's temperature seemed to drop as she brought up the fortress world specifications. 3 planetary rings of automated defense platforms, a fleet of 10,000 warships, planetary shields that could withstand a supernova. Impossible to breach conventionally, Chen admitted. But conventional isn't what we're doing anymore. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward. Dr. Marcus Webb, head of Project Prometheus, looked nothing like the brilliant physicist he'd been 3 weeks ago. His eyes held the same haunted look shared by every parent whose child had been taken. We've completed the prototype, he said, his voice hoarse. The quantum tunnel device. It's not exactly stable. Using it will likely tear apart the fabric of space-time around Varketh Prime. We never would have considered using it before. Too dangerous, too unpredictable. And now? Admiral Rice asked. Now? Webb laughed, a hollow sound. Now I'll activate it myself if it means getting my daughter back. The next hour was devoted to Operation Sentinel's Dawn. It wasn't just a military campaign. It was a fundamental reimagining of warfare. Humanity had spent centuries developing weapons they hoped never to use. Now, every ethical constraint, every safety protocol, every limitation was being stripped away. The Varaxians believe they can negotiate. Rise addressed the gathering. They've sent 16 diplomatic messages in the last 2 days, offering to discuss terms. They think this is a conventional conflict that can be resolved through traditional means. They're wrong. The holographic display shifted again, showing the faces of the taken children. This isn't war anymore. This is rescue and retribution. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon has one purpose: get our children back and ensure no species ever considers taking human children again. In orbit around Earth, the largest fleet in human history was assembling. ships of all sizes and configurations, their hulls stripped of identification and painted with that same bloody handprint. At their center, the UES Nemesis had been retrofitted with Webb's quantum tunnel device, its power core modified to channel enough energy to tear a hole in reality itself. On the Varaxian fortress world, High Admiral Kexnar received the latest intelligence reports with growing unease. Human ships were appearing at the edges of Varaxian space, but not attacking. Just watching. Waiting. Their communications had gone silent, except for a single message broadcast, once every hour. Return them. Elder Valkyr, now under house arrest for her vocal opposition to the operation, sent one final message to the High Council. You believe you have caged their offspring. But what you've actually done is wounded every human parent, soldier, and citizen simultaneously. You've given an entire species nothing left to lose, and in doing so, you've ensured they have only one thing left to live for: vengeance. As if in response to her words, proximity alarms began blaring across Varaxian space. The human fleet wasn't just attacking one world or sector. They were coming for everything, all at once. And leading the charge was the UES Nemesis, its quantum drive beginning to glow with impossible energies, ready to tear a hole straight through the heart of the Varaxian Empire. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. The Varaxian battle carrier, Eternal Dominion, shuddered as another human assault wave crashed against its shields. From the command deck, Fleet Commander Rixtal watched in horror as 3 more Varaxian capital ships disappeared from his tactical display. Impossible. He chittered, his crystalline exoskeleton crackling with stress. They're ignoring all tactical doctrine. Their ships are flying through their own nuclear detonations. They're using their destroyed vessels as weapons. The humans had developed a new tactic that defied conventional warfare. When their ships were critically damaged, instead of retreating, they activated their quantum drives and accelerated into the nearest Varaxian vessel. The resulting space-time distortions were ripping holes in reality itself. On a secure channel, Elder Valkyr's voice cut through the chaos. Commander, you must listen. I've accessed the human historical archives. This behavior, it's happened before. When their young are threatened, humans undergo a psychological change. They stop weighing cost against benefit. Survival becomes secondary to protecting their offspring. A nearby explosion rocked the ship. Then how do we stop them? Rixtal demanded. Stop them. Valkyr's laugh was bitter. You don't stop a force of nature. You can only survive it. Aboard the UES Nemesis, Admiral Rise watched the battle unfold with cold satisfaction. The Varaxians had expected human ships to break off when damaged, a logical assumption for any species that valued self-preservation. Instead, every damaged human vessel became a guided missile, its crew volunteering to become weapons of last resort. Quantum tunnel device at 89% charge, Dr. Webb reported, his fingers dancing across the controls. The spatial distortions are higher than predicted. When this goes off, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone knew this was a one-way mission. Status of the child detention facilities. Rise demanded. Intelligence Director Chen's hologram flickered. Confirmed locations on all 3 primary facilities. The Varaxians thought spreading them out would make a rescue impossible. Instead, they've given us 3 targets we don't have to worry about collateral damage around. The bridge crew worked with mechanical precision, their faces set in identical masks of controlled fury. They had trained for years to fight conventional wars. Now they were writing a new chapter in human military history, one that would serve as a warning for millennia to come. In his fortress on Varketh Prime, High Admiral Kexnar was finally beginning to understand the true magnitude of his mistake. The latest casualty reports were staggering. Entire Varaxian fleets were being annihilated. Colonial worlds were going dark. And still the humans came, their ships seemingly endless, their tactics becoming more devastating with each engagement. My lord, his aide interrupted, mandibles clicking nervously. We're detecting spatial anomalies around all 3 detention facilities. The humans, they're attempting something. Before Kexanar could respond, reality itself seemed to tear open. The quantum tunnel device didn't just create a passage through space. It shredded the barrier between dimensions. Human strike teams, equipped with experimental phase shift armor, stepped through the tiers in spacetime, appearing simultaneously in all three facilities. The Varaxian guards never stood a chance. Their weapons, designed to fight conventional forces, were useless against troops that could phase between dimensions. The rescue teams moved with terrible efficiency, their only goal to secure the children. Elder Valkyr, watching from her secured chamber, sent out a final broadcast to all Varaxian forces. You believe taking their children would show human weakness. Instead, you have witnessed their greatest strength. A human who believes they have nothing left to lose is the most dangerous force in the galaxy. The quantum tunnels began to collapse, their unstable energies tearing apart the space around them. But through the dimensional storms, the rescue teams emerged with their precious cargo, 3,417 children, scared but alive. As the quantum tunnels collapsed, they took entire chunks of the Varaxian facilities with them, creating wounds in spacetime that would never fully heal. A reminder of humanity's wrath, written into the fabric of the universe itself. But the war wasn't over. The children were secure, yes, but humanity had tasted blood, and they had learned something terrible about themselves. When pushed far enough, there was nothing they wouldn't do, no line they wouldn't cross, no force they wouldn't unleash. The Varaxians had wanted to learn humanity's weakness. Instead, they had discovered its most terrifying strength, the capacity for unlimited escalation in defense of their young. And now that strength was turned fully against them. The children were safe, but humanity's rage had not subsided. If anything, seeing the trauma inflicted on their young had only fueled their determination to ensure such an atrocity would never happen again. Admiral Reyes stood in the medical bay of the UVS Nemesis, watching through armored glass as doctors treated the rescued children. Some bore signs of neglect, others of crude medical examinations. All carried psychological scars that would take years to heal. They sedated them, Dr. Sarah Morrison, the chief medical officer, reported through clenched teeth. Kept them in stasis when they wouldn't stop crying. Some of the younger ones don't even remember their names anymore. Reyes's hand tightened on the railing until her knuckles turned white. Status of the Varaxian Empire. Breaking. Intelligence Director Chen appeared beside her, her hologram flickering with barely contained satisfaction. The quantum tunnel explosions created permanent dead zones in their territory. Their fleet is in disarray. And the best part, their own people are turning against them. On dozens of Varaxian worlds, civil unrest had erupted. The species had always prided itself on its logical, hierarchical society. But the sight of human vengeance, of an entire species willing to tear reality apart to rescue its young, had shaken their fundamental beliefs. Elder Valkyr, now freed from house arrest by her own supporters, addressed the remnants of the Varaxian High Council. You believe humans were primitive because they protect their weak. But look at what that drive has produced. A species willing to sacrifice everything, to break every rule, to defy physics itself for their children. That is not weakness. That is terrible, magnificent strength. The council chamber erupted in chaos as reports flooded in. Human ships were appearing everywhere, striking with devastating precision. They no longer bothered with military targets alone. Research facilities, cultural centers, historical archives. Anything that might help the Varaxians rebuild was systematically destroyed. High Admiral Kexnar, watching his empire crumble from his command bunker on Varketh Prime, finally made the call. This is High Admiral Kexnar to all human forces. We surrender, unconditionally. The response came not from military command, but from a civilian channel. Dr. Marcus Webb, father of one of the rescued children, his voice carrying the weight of every parent who had endured weeks of nightmare uncertainty. Surrender isn't enough. You need to understand. You need to learn. The terms of surrender were unprecedented in galactic history. The Varaxians would survive, but they would be transformed. Human medical teams would alter their biology, ensuring that future generations would form the same powerful parent-child bonds that humans possessed. They would feel what it meant to love their children with that same fierce, irrational devotion. This isn't punishment, Admiral Rise explained to the assembled Varaxian leadership. This is education. You're going to learn why we fought so hard, why we were willing to break the universe itself. And then you're going to help us ensure no species ever makes your mistake again. In the decades that followed, the story of the human-Varaxian War became a cautionary tale told throughout the galaxy. Not because of the military tactics or the advanced technology, but because of what it revealed about humanity's nature. Videos spread across the galaxy, recordings of human ships flying into certain death to protect transport vessels carrying rescued children. Documentation of soldiers using experimental phase shift technology that ate away at their own bodies, just for a chance to save one more child. Evidence of an entire species deciding that no cost was too high, no sacrifice too great, when their children were at stake. As the Varaxian Empire transformed under human supervision, Elder Valkyr wrote what would become famous words in the new Galactic Accord. The universe is vast and full of terrors, but none so terrible as a species that has mastered space travel and yet still retains the primitive, powerful drive to protect its young at any cost. Remember humanity's response when we took their children. Remember and never repeat our mistake. The human fleet began its withdrawal, leaving behind a changed civilization and a warning written in the scars of space-time itself. They had come not just to rescue their children, but to ensure that the lesson would echo through history. Humanity's greatest weakness was, in truth, its most devastating strength. 20 years after the human-Varaxian War, the Great Hall of Reconciliation on Earth hosted an unprecedented gathering. Humans and Varaxians sat together, not as former enemies, but as species forever changed by their shared history. Admiral Helena Reyes, now serving as Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council, watched as a young Varaxian child clutched her parent's crystalline hand, the parent's exoskeleton softening in response, a biological change that would have been impossible in the old Varaxian species. The sight still amazed her, even after all these years. They understand now, Elder Valkyr said softly, her aged carapace bearing the sacred red handprint that had once been humanity's symbol of vengeance, but had become something else entirely, not just intellectually, but in their very beings. The gathering was marking the completion of the Species Integration Protocol, the program that had transformed Varaxian society from its cold, hierarchical structure into something that could truly comprehend the depth of their past crimes. Dr. Marcus Webb, his hair now gray but his eyes still sharp, stood at the podium. His daughter Sarah, one of the rescued children, stood beside him. She had grown into a xenobiologist, specializing in the study of parent-child bonds across species. 20 years ago, Webb began, we discovered something about ourselves. When our children were taken, we became something terrible and magnificent. We broke the laws of physics. We shattered reality itself. We rewrote the very nature of another species. Not out of hatred, but out of love. The audience. Valkyr touched her modified exoskeleton, feeling the rush of parental emotion that would have been alien to her old self. How can I regret gaining the ability to love so deeply? You didn't just defeat us, Admiral. You gave us the greatest gift one species can give another, the capacity to understand why you fought so hard. Above them, the stars continued their eternal dance, now watching over a galaxy forever changed by the lesson of what happens when you mistake humanity's greatest strength for a weakness. The price had been high, but the understanding gained was worth more than all the empires in space. The children of both species would grow up knowing not just the story of the war, but the story of what came after, how vengeance had transformed into understanding, and how the protection of the young had become the foundation of a new kind of galactic civilization. It was a lesson written not just in history books, but in the very DNA of a changed species, in the scars of space-time, and in the hearts of all who would come after. Never again would the galaxy forget.